Hey gang, welcome to What You're Craving. Molly here, solo pod day. Before I get to the topic at hand, which I'm obviously obsessed with, wanted to say we had such an amazing time at Molly Q&A. I really hope you consider coming if you're listening. It's the first Monday in August. You can go on mollycarmel.com and check it out. It's such a great thing. And even if you can't come, you can still submit a question. You get a replay. I don't know. I have teachers who do replays and I listen to those things as I go to bed at night, like osmosis. So I can only aspire to have you listening to my voice as I go to sleep. Am I right? And we have Intense Sati. I've taken 2 weeks off Intense Sati in the spirit of godmothering and spending time with my godson. And it's back. And it's better than ever. So please try to come. It's at 8 a.m. And we have an upcoming divorcing dieting workshop in August. You can check that out on mollycarmel.com. And we have Breaking Up with Sugar course, which you can get any old time. So anyway, I just like to let you know what I'm up to because I'm generally obsessed with you. I want to be able to be of maximum service. I want to be able to help you. I love getting to be in everybody's life. It's actually not even arguably, it is without question the best part of having written Breaking Up with Sugar and having gotten this beautiful platform as a result of it. It is the greatest gift to be able to be in relationship with so many of you. And listen, I'm an addict. More is more. So when it comes to being in relationship with more of you, count me in on that. So please come get to know me, come hang, come to the Facebook group, come to all the things, come to Sati, Molly Q&A. And I promise I'm just trying to figure out when the best date for this online retreat reschedule is. So many people are saying summer's a bad time. Here's what I want to say about all of this. What I really need to do when it comes to planning this retreat, wait for it, is listen to my wise mind. That's what we're talking about today. Because actually the whole reason I planned this retreat was because in Molly Q&A and all the workshops and all the beautiful time I get to spend in community in the Facebook group, as I stalk the Facebook group, all I read about and all I hear about is this terrible, and I mean intentionally using the word terrible here, this terrible phrase, I can't trust myself. I just can't trust myself. People say, well, what about this food? What about this protein bar? What do you think about almond flour? I'm like, I know what I think of almond flour. I know what the science says about almond flour, but the only thing that matters is what you think of almond flour. What you think. I think I can have whole wheat bread. I don't know if you can have whole wheat bread. I mean, first of all, you can have anything you want. Let's be clear on that. But I think the context is, Molly, I don't know if that's going to give me an addictive feeling and I'm going to want more and more and more. And I'll say, well, I think the only way you can figure that out is if you go and try it. And the response will always be, I don't think I can trust myself with that. My friend was like, I can't trust myself to have a scale in my house. I'm like, what? That is unacceptable because eating disorder, addiction, cravings, they've stolen from us for so long. And if we're working on healing, the first thing we got to be taken back is our power. And we have to be learning how to trust ourselves. So we're doing a whole retreat on this, but I really wanted to talk about one of the main concepts when it comes to the skill of learning how to trust yourself. And as many of you know, and if you don't, you're just getting to know me. Hi, love you. One of the concepts that Marsha Linehan, who created dialectical behavioral therapy, and she's a Buddhist Zen Buddhist master. She's a lot of things. I mean, to me, she's a goddess, literally. I have a picture of her on my altar. She talks about this idea of a wise mind. And that's what I wanted to talk about on the podcast today. Because I think starting to become familiar with your wise mind might end up being the most important skill you acquire when it comes to solving or healing your issues with food, weight, substance, people, clothes. We're so constantly in this impulsive, reactive, mindless, take those like two words, mindless without mind, right? Mindless without mind, or with less mind space. And we're making a lot of important choices in the mindless space. And all these words have really lost their meaning, but if you really boil them down, mindless is like without mind, and mindful is with mind, right? And Marsha Linehan calls it wise mind. And she says, and it's not just her, because lucky for me, I'm a seeker and I've studied lots and lots and lots of ideas and religions and such. And there's almost every single spiritual practice, talks about there being something, inside of us, this knowing. Fun fact about me, I love trashy TV. Scandal, the show Scandal used to be one of my favorite shows on earth, and Olivia Pope on Scandal would say, I trust my gut. And that's what our wise mind is. It's our gut. It's that, I think Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a part in that book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and it calls it like an untapped inner resource inside of us. It's like a general knowing, right? It's like a general knowing. And when we're being impulsive, reactive, when our brain is on fire, when our dopamine shooting left, right, like, upside down, when it's like a snowstorm, it's really hard to be accessing and acting from that internal wisdom inside. But let me break this down for you, because, to me, like the end game of this whole thing is that we're like participating in mindfulness, which means participating in building the muscle that helps us to get into our wisdom faster, and leave it for less time. And also that we're starting to like know what our wise mind is. I'll tell you the end of the talk before I even start it. But here's the real truth, right? When we are in wise mind, when we are in our own internal wisdom, there's no binging. There's no binging. There's no restricting. There's no scale obsession. There's no body hate. There's no over drinking. There's none of it. There's none of it. And as per my beginning, your wise mind knows if whole wheat flour is a good idea, or your wise mind knows if this protein works because you eat this protein bar and you say, you know what, this is making me triggered, so I'm not going to do that anymore. That's wise mind. I love when I teach, I've taught this for so many years. When I teach this, I ask a question to the group. When I say, have you ever just had a deep knowing about something? And I got to tell you, answers are astounding. I've had people be like, yes, I have known that I needed to get divorced. I have known that I had to retire, that it was time for me to retire. I had known that it was time for me to start having children. I have known that it was time for me to break up a relationship. I have known, I knew that I had to switch professions. I mean, when we can get quiet and tapped in, there's a whole lot of information available to us. One of my beloved teachers, Carolyn Mace, always says, there's no such thing as an unanswered prayer. We just don't always want to know the answer. Am I right? So that's an interesting piece. But I want to talk about how we get to wise mind and what wise mind is. And there's a Venn diagram. You can just go Google wise mind right now and it will come up on your screen, the Venn diagram. But we talk about there being two parts of the mind, right? So on one side, on the left-hand side, we have our reasonable mind. And that's like when our reason is in charge. It's where we do math, right? It's when we approach solutions and ideas intellectually, making decisions based on fact, reason, right? Creating a budget, figuring out what subway route to take. Like if I said to you, it's without any feeling, reasonable mind is without any feeling. So if I said to you, how do you feel about 1 + 1? I hope you look at me and be like, I don't have feelings about 1+1, Molly. It's 2. Like I am neutral. But that's reasonable mind, right? And a great example of somebody who like is completely reasonable minded is like Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory. You know, he doesn't bring emotion into any of his decisions. And in many ways, it's very comical, right? Spock from Star Trek. I mean, I have to get some kind of Gen Z reference. If you're in Gen Z, send me a note. Let me know who the new reference is for who's just in reasonable mind. But you know, and what I want to say about reasonable mind and emotion mind, which I'll get into in a second, is that neither is good and neither is bad. They're just functional and they just are, right? So we don't need to make judgments, because sometimes people think that reasonable mind is robotic, emotion mind is crazy. I mean, friends, we've got to take the judgment out of all of this. It's essential in getting what we want here. So that's on one side, the reasonable mind. Interestingly enough, though, like, I think I might be making a reasonable mind sound like it is like good, but reasonable mind in its trickiness, sort of in its ways that it can act against you, is really where we can make like where we can rationalize, or as I like to call it, rational lies. Am I right? For me, honestly, it's where potato chips lie. Like, I can rationalize my way into potato chips like so often. And listen, like, potato chips are neither good nor bad, but in the moments in which I don't need them, I'm not hungry for them, they're not in alignment with what I'm trying to do in my relationship with food, you know, they can get down the hatch pretty quickly. My reasonable mind is pretty gifted in being able to access that. So that's reasonable mind on one side. And then on the other side, we have our emotion mind. And this is very familiar to all of us, I think. You know, it's really when our emotions are in charge, right? One of my, Alan Frazzetti, who's one of my DBT teachers, this is how he explains emotion mind. You know, he says, you know, have you ever said something to somebody that you love and then said, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that to them? Me, hello. Oh, open mouth, insert foot. But it's really when our emotions are running the show, right? Saying something hurtful when you're angry, binging impulsively. We all know this, restricting impulsively, getting on the scale 400 times a day. That being said, it's also like, you know, when I stop, sometimes I'm in a meeting and I stop what I'm doing just to lay on the floor with my puppy. I mean, that's not really, there's no reason to that. I just do that, right? Or gosh, I don't know about you all, but I have been in intense love and it's wonderful, but whew, it's certainly not reasonable. And my favorite idea, honestly, though, of emotion mind is like my best friend, Michelle. She's very fancy. And she has a lot of really, really nice things. And in college, we weren't even allowed to sit on her bed because she was like, didn't want our dirt on her. And then she had kids. She's the greatest kids. They're my godchildren. And I remember when my godson was like 3 years old and he was like jumping up and down, like with his sneakers on the white couch. And, you know, and she wasn't happy about it, but like it was allowed. And I thought, wow, that is emotion mind working for good. You know, and I don't know, I've made a lot of emotion mind decisions in my life. I do think about my godchildren and they're like, yeah, can you take us to the Jets game on Saturday night? And I'll say like, yeah, totally, sure. And it's completely an emotion mind decision because it doesn't work for me. It's going to be really hard to do, but my love is so strong that I want to do it. So emotion mind isn't good or bad either, right? It just has positive traits and negative traits. A lot of times when we're thinking about it, we are thinking about it, I guess, in a more negative way because we're trying to regulate our emotions back into our wise mind. So I think that's like a really important piece of it. The only reason we think about it negatively is that sometimes our emotions really take over the show. And I know that if you're involved in addictions or eating disorders, you most definitely know what I'm saying. Sort of all the way on the very end of the right side of the Venn diagram lies some really hard stuff, like when our emotions take over in such an extraordinary way, as I've said many times, that I could be standing in your kitchen, you know, saying, hey, you want to talk it out? And you'd be like, get away, because your emotions are so in charge when it comes to wanting to binge or restrict or anything like that. So those are the two states of mind in the Venn diagram, right? And in DBT, we say, what are we missing? What's the balance? The answer is never the opposite. The answer is always the balance. So it's not like when we're being reasonable, we want to be emotional, or when we're emotional, we want to be reasonable. It's actually more of a coupling, right? It's like the wise mind is when our reason is being informed by emotion and our emotion is being informed by reason, right? It's where the reasonable mind and the emotional mind overlap. It's the integration of those two things. And it's that real, these days we have so many words for it in like the spiritual bypass of life, but it's really like tapped in, plugged in, connected. It's all of those ideas. When everybody is talking about the idea that they don't trust themselves, that I can't trust myself around that. I can't have a scale in my house. I don't trust myself. I can't go out to dinner. I don't trust myself. You're not in your wise mind then. Your wise mind can go out to dinner. Fair enough. Your wise mind also might say to you, hey, we can't go out to dinner, but that's not a forever thing. That's an every now and then thing, right? But your wise mind can know whether or not you can have peanut butter. You can try peanut butter again, staying in your wise mind, right? Your wise mind says, hey, I know that culture is saying that fat on your legs is ugly, but you know that it's not. Wear those shorts and go outside. Like that is what wise mind says. So your eating disordered voice is not your wise mind, right? Your addiction voice is not your wise mind. By the way, nor is like your clean voice, which says like, oh, it's fine. I can totally handle it. Like none of that is wise mind, right? Marsha Linehan says, there's a beautiful quote, right? That your wise mind is the part of each of us that can know and experience the truth. It's where we know something to be true and valid. So when we lose our mind, so sometimes we're sitting in our wise mind, right? And something happens. Somebody yells at us. I don't know, maybe you get on a scale, or maybe you have a traumatic memory, or, maybe you just sneeze wrong and you just sort of lose your mind. Does this happen to you? I hope so, or else I'm just a complete weirdo, and I know I'm not. And you sort of lose your mind, right? And so the process of being mindful, it's Marsha Linehan's definition, but it's always my definition. Her definition of mindfulness is, ready for this one, refocusing your attention back to your wise mind. And here's like the real truth of all of this. The best way to do that. So again, when we're in our wise mind, we can completely trust ourselves. Like, oh, I want to tell you this one other thing. Sorry, I have to say this. I have notes, but sometimes just a better thought comes to my mind. Okay. So here's the only other thing that's so important, friends. You really want to get a pen for this one. People are like, well, how do I know the difference between my emotion mind and my wise mind? That's my favorite question on the planet Earth, only because like, namaste, I understand that. Because there are times, there are times like I'll get an email and it will enrage me. My lioness just is ready to attack. And I will say to my office manager, Amaret, I will say, I am going to write them an email back, and this is what I'm going to say, or I'm going to call them on the phone. Here's what I'm going to say to them. And I can't believe they would say that to me. And if you said to me in that moment, Molly, are you in your wise mind? I would sign an affidavit in blood being, I am in my wise mind, and this is what I need to do. And Amaret will say to me, why don't you wait till tomorrow and then decide if you want to do it? And I'll know I'm not in my wise mind. So here's your note. Here's your big quote. Here's the quotable. Urgency is never wise mind. When it feels urgent, when it feels like it cannot wait, with the exception of like you're bleeding out or like a tiger is chasing you, it's never your wise mind. If it can't wait, it's not wise. This is like I'm giving you a gift, because with the urgency of binging, restricting, food obsession, scale obsession, getting substance. Wow. Even getting the Stanley 40-ounce cup, I have urgency. Like none of that is wise mind, right? All of that is emotion mind. And if we can start there, it's such a great place to start. And by the way, if you're really thinking that urgent emotion mind is your wise mind, no wonder you can't trust yourself, right? You're getting bad data and you're giving in to your impulses all of the time, that in a way, and I understand this, and I hope you do too, when you're constantly reacting to your emotions, it will start to feel like wise mind. It'll feel normative to you, right? And then you're going to create the belief system via behavior that you can't trust yourself. And that's just complete nonsense. So the way that we can refocus our attention, the best practice of refocusing your attention back to your wise mind is a mindfulness practice. And, to me, the oldest prescriptions are the best prescriptions. And the truth is that meditation, sitting with ourselves in the present moment, letting thoughts come in, thoughts come, thoughts go, right? And just refocusing your attention. When you lose your attention for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, that's actually how you strengthen, one of the many ways, but it's, I think, the best way, because you can start a practice of it, of being able to restore your wise mind pretty quickly, right? It's also the way, and this is what I love most about meditation. Maybe I'll do a whole podcast on my experience with meditation, because I've had a really, I have a long-standing meditation practice, by the way, by desperation, not by virtue. Let me share that with you. I was just going stark raving mad about 10 years ago, and I thought I got to do something different. So I had to go, trade in my spiritual Chevy for a Cadillac and get a big, gigantic meditation practice. If you want to listen about my meditation practice a little bit, the second podcast or the third podcast we ever did on what you're craving is with Bob Roth, my meditation teacher, who's the CEO of David Lynch Foundation, Transcendental Meditation. Although that's not really what I'm talking about here, though, if you want to pick up a big, gigantic meditation practice, you're not going to hear any complaints from your friend Molly. But I'm actually suggesting even a small meditation practice, even a decision to sit quietly for 3 minutes a day, let what comes, let what goes, go. What that practice does, just to quell the myth that you're supposed to be sitting there on a cloud. The truth is that my meditation practice started, it was like violence. I couldn't wait till those 20 minutes were over. But what it ended up doing was making me very comfortable with my negative emotions and my negative feelings, because I learned how to sit with them. We're running from them so often. We're sitting in emotion brain. We're starting to believe that we are emotion mind, which we're not. It's a part of us, but it's not who we are. And then we're not able to trust ourselves. It actually makes perfect sense to me. And of course, there's all other sorts of things we can talk about when we're talking about relearning how to trust ourselves or learning how to trust ourselves. But this idea of fortifying the wise mind, right? Of being able to sit quietly with yourself 1 minute, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, 22 minutes, whatever it is daily, helps us to get back to our wise mind quicker and stay there longer, and to not be familiar with what your wise mind is. The other example I've given in years past, because people say, I don't have a wise mind. And I'll say to them, why is bullying bad? And they'll say to me, I don't know, it just is. It's like that inherent knowledge of bullying being bad and not even being able to put words on it. Of course we could. That's wise mind. It's like, duh, it just is, right? We have this inner knowing inside. And it's funny, right? We're sitting here, we're talking about eating disorders, addiction, or misery. And I'm saying to you, you got to know yourself. You have to know your center, right? You have to know this resource inside of you, this stillness inside of you. And, I always want to roll my eyes at what I'm saying to you, except for this one is the most true of all of them, my friends. Starting to know, be in relationship with, and exercise your wise mind might actually be the greatest gift that you give yourself, right? It takes, and the other thing I say, I'm just always the bearer of unsexy news over here, but it takes a lot of precision and practice to decipher wise mind and emotion mind. And so it might take a little time. Your wise mind might be in the ICU. I mean, I know when I was deep in addiction, my wise mind was like, being held hostage by my addiction. But starting to practice and being on this quest to be in better relationship with your wise mind might be the greatest gift you give yourself, right? I would also want to say, like, if you're deep in addiction, it's hard to access it. That's just neurological, but not impossible. So this idea of starting this practice of trusting yourself. I mean, trusting yourself comes via action, right? So when we can access our wise mind, the actions that we're going to be taking from our wise mind, listen, they may be super brave and off the chain. I've seen people, leave their jobs, but I also think there are moments like if you are somebody who is working on healing your eating disorder, that you had a wise mind moment there where you said, I really need to get help. I mean, that's the greatest of the wise mind. So let me know what you think. I want to talk more about this. So, send me some kind of DM, info@mollycarmel.com, DM me on Facebook or on Instagram. Like, where should we go from here? Like, where should we go with talking about wise mind and learning how to retrust ourselves? Listen, you are worth fighting for. Like, that's all I can tell you today. You are worth fighting for. You are lovable. You are enough exactly as you are. We need you believing that ASAP. The world needs you. I need you. I love you. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I'll see y'all next week.